If kids like this, and Thomas and Friends All Engines Go is a hit with today's kids, that's fine. But what makes me sad is that those kids will not. I don't think Thomas and Friends All Engines Go, based on what I've seen and heard about it, is going to be something that's going to teach or show kids the wonderful, how wonderful trains and steam locomotives are. I want to start this off by sharing two of my most treasured material possessions. The first is a copy of Railway Series number 18, Stepney the Bluebell Engine, which was signed by Reverend Wilbert Awdry, its author, and the creator of Thomas the Tank Engine. And the second are travel tickets from my own trip to the Bluebell Railway in England back in 2015. Thomas the Tank Engine has been a treasured part of my life. It's been a treasured part of me since I was a very small child, and it's something that's really shaped who I am as a person, given me comfort in difficult times, and it's something that I treasure immensely. And visiting the Bluebell Railway was a really special moment in my life, in which I was able to, realize in a certain way the love of real life railroading that Thomas the Tank Engine instilled in me when I was a child. I walked away from Thomas the Tank Engine, as far as following the show, back in 2001. I had watched maybe about half of season 5, or series 5 as it would be called in the UK. I didn't dislike it, but I could feel like, yeah, I like what this is. I don't dislike this, but it's not what I remember. And I just accepted that with no hard feelings and moved away from it. So 2001, so at this point for 20 years, I have walked away from Thomas. From my perspective over the years, hey, if kids today like this stuff, what Thomas is now, and it gets them to like Thomas, even if it's different from what I grew up with, and if it's different from the original source material, and if it's no longer has connections to real life railroading, that's all fine to me. As long as kids love Thomas and they look into it, they'll learn about the older books, because there's so much material online that was, about the original books. And what gets me about Thomas and Friends, Modern Thomas, but in particular All Engines Go, is the fact that they seem, I guess, increasingly ashamed, of the source material, the original books by Reverend Wilbert Awdry. They seem ashamed of the source material. They seem ashamed of the subject matter. The subject matter being real life railways and real life railway history and real life steam locomotives. They seem to be ashamed of the characters, with characters such as Edward, Henry, in particular, but many others. James doesn't appear to be in this new iteration of Thomas and Friends. I mean, we've only seen, there's only been a little bit shown of it, so other characters could appear, but it seems as though James, Henry, Toby, all these classic characters who have been part of Thomas and Friends since the 1940s and 50s and 60s are being cast aside. So when you have this version of Thomas the Tank Engine that is ashamed of the source material, they're ashamed of the real life history, they're ashamed of many of the iconic characters, and when you don't have the source material, when you don't have the subject matter, which is railroading and railroading history, when you don't have the characters, there's nothing left. I mean, there's the parable of the ship of Theseus, or grandfather's axe, where grandpa has an axe, he passes it on to his son, the son replaces the handle, and the son passes it on to the grandson, he replaces the axe head. It's no longer Grandpa's axe. It's been parted out one piece at a time till there's nothing left. There's nothing left. It's not Thomas. It's called Thomas. It's not Thomas. When I overheard, I really don't follow Thomas news closely. I don't follow the fandom. But when I overheard that, Mattel came to take possession of the Thomas brand, I thought, hey, Mattel's a toy company. Maybe they could know what to do with Thomas and Friends. And then, sometime, I didn't dwell on it, just sometime later, I don't know if it might have been a week later, might have been some months later, I saw some of the toys Mattel was putting out. I saw a Thomas toy train in a store I was shopping in, and it was a Thomas train in which Thomas only had 4 wheels. And if you look back to the very first episode of Thomas the Tank Engine from 1984, the first several seconds of the very first episode, you know that Thomas has 6 wheels. It is one of the most iconic aspects of Thomas as a character.
Thomas is a tank engine who lives at a big station on the island of Sodor. He's a cheeky little engine with 6 small wheels, 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 6 small wheels.
It is like Thomas without his 6 wheels is like Mickey Mouse without his ears. It's like Pikachu without his tail. It's like Popeye without his muscles and without his spinach and his sailor outfit. It is totally missing what Thomas is as a character, and just in terms of the physical appearance of the toy. And then I came to be aware of this new line of Thomas wooden toy trains. The Thomas toys that were compatible with those tracks were part of my childhood, and the new versions that I had seen being passed around on Twitter resembled counterfeit merchandise that imported from overseas. They didn't resemble officially licensed Thomas toys. The workmanship and the craftsmanship of these toys resembled literal counterfeit merchandise. Another item demonstrating the lack of care Mattel has taken with the Thomas franchise are these die-cast toys of Gordon and James proudly posing with their names graffitied on them. It's a perfect metaphor for how Mattel has handled the Thomas franchise. They've vandalized it, and they're proudly selling toys of their own characters in a vandalized state.
"Excuse me," inquired Duke. "Are you a vandal? Driver told me vandals break and smash things." "Fuck you, impudent scallywags."
My dear mother, sometimes, because she knows I love Thomas. Sometimes I don't buy Thomas merchandise, modern Thomas merchandise. Sometimes she'll send me stuff just because it has Thomas on it, just as a little gift, because, I live far away from my mom, and she misses me, and, bless her heart, I love you, Mom. Sometimes she'll send me, I found some Thomas the Tank Engine tissues at Dollar Tree, and she'll send me some. It's like, okay. And she sent me this Thomas the Tank Engine Hot Wheels toy. And what this is a car. This is Thomas the Tank Engine depicted as an automobile. Which is like, on its end, I know since Mattel's owned it, they've been different crossovers with like DC superheroes and stuff like that. This doesn't bother me, but it was just kind of interesting, just the idea of Thomas as making Thomas toys that depict Thomas as a car and not as a tank engine. It's Thomas the Tank Engine where he's not a tank engine. And there have been many fantasies sequences I've been aware of where Thomas is imagining himself as an airplane, or as a boat, or as an animal even, or as a spaceship. And it's like, Mattel just seems ashamed that Thomas is a tank engine. For those who might be confused as to why I'm talking about my disappointment, my sadness, and the lack of railway realism in Thomas the Tank Engine, or those who are more familiar with the more modern versions of Thomas, this may be hard to believe, but Thomas the Tank Engine was actually rooted in deep lore and world building and actual British steam locomotive, steam railroading history.
TALYLLYN was relegated to the old barn next to the passenger station, and here she sat for 6 years. While she rested, the railway was noticed by a certain Reverend Audrey. He transformed the TALYLLYN's #1 into Scar Lowy in his Railway series books, and the later television show Thomas the Tank Engine.
to the point where I'd go as far as to say that the island of Sodor, the setting for Thomas the Tank Engine, alongside C.S. Lewis's Narnia, alongside J.R.R. Tolkien's Middle Earth, I'd say that Sodor is one of the examples of 20th century, British literature, and, alongside Harry Potter, of having this deep lore and world building for the setting, and the modern iteration of Thomas has nothing to do with it. If you look at the original seasons of Thomas the Tank Engine, especially seasons 1 through 4, if you look at what's there, if you look at what's on screen, the locomotives, these machines, don't do anything that a real-life locomotive wouldn't be capable of doing. There's a wonderful video by a creator on YouTube. His name is Sir Wobble Crabbington, that basically uses a realistic train sim to reenact scenes from the first episode of Thomas the Tank Engine. What you have is a depiction of a realistic railroad.
He fussed into the station where Gordon was waiting. "Hurry up, you," said Gordon. "Hurry yourself," replied Thomas. Gordon began making his plan. "Yes," said Gordon, "I will." He fussed into the station where Gordon was waiting. "Hurry up, you," said Gordon. "Hurry yourself," replied Thomas. Gordon began making his plan. "Yes," said Gordon, "I will."
And unfortunately, the modern Thomas, and in particular Thomas and Friends All Engines Go, is about as far away from that as you can possibly get. And it's kind of funny. What I have to say about Thomas and Friends All Engines Go from the limited material that's been available is, well, first off, just the characters. And the unfortunate thing is, in All Engines Go, 2 of the 3 characters from the very first book in the franchise no longer exist. We just have Thomas and Gordon. Thomas being number 1, Gordon having number 4 painted on his tender. All the engine characters have had their numbers painted on them since the late 50s, or since the late 40s, if not the early 50s. And when you look at All Engines Go, you see Gordon with number 4, you see Thomas with number 1, number 3, James, he's gone. Number 2, Edward, he's gone. Number 3, Henry, he's gone. And so you just have this weird, fear of the original characters that launched this franchise. So you're abandoning characters that have been part of the Thomas franchise since the 1940s. And there's just a really unfortunate, what I perceive as a lack of care in this new version of Thomas. And it's not a lack of effort, it's just a lack of care, not by the people making it. I mean, you could say it extends to them, but it's ultimately on the hands of the higher ups at Mattel who mandated and pushed the series in this direction, away, even further away than ever before from real life railroading. I mean, if you look at Thomas, what the railway series and books and what the television series started out as, where you have these beloved characters, we have action scenes and everything that made Thomas what it is, and while adhering to the physical real-world rules of what steam locomotives are capable of doing, and then looking at some of the material that's been shown for All Engines Go, where characters are literally steam locomotives are literally going through loop-de-loops like a roller coaster, getting as far away from anything resembling railway realism as possible. And once again, Thomas was made because kids love trains, and to teach kids to love trains and steam locomotives. And even if this show turns out to be something that today's kids do enjoy, it's the unfortunate fact to me is, or at least what I expect, is that this show will have absolutely minimal, if not non-existent, impact in terms of teaching kids to appreciate steam locomotives and railways and trains, which is something that the the classic Thomas the Tank Engine series and the books were able to do, while having exciting characters and stories that were based on things that happened on real-life railways, in particular in Great Britain. Just the lack of detail on the characters is unfortunate. I mean, when it comes to steam locomotives, one of the things that makes kids so attracted to them is the ability to see the cylinders and the rods push the wheels. You can really visually see how these machines work with the naked eye, and they've done away with that detail. No detail whatsoever on the side rods. Thomas doesn't have his side rods. If you look at the comparison of Gordon, even in the CG series, which is criticized by many fans for the lack of realism, if you look at the realism in the CG series compared to an All Engines Go, and yes, it's part of the art style, but it's just the idea that Mattel is robbing themselves of some of the most attractive aspects of these characters that can get kids' attention. That being, seeing those side rods and pistons move. Another thing I want to comment on in regards to Thomas and Friends All Engines Go is the inclusion of the character Nia. Nia was introduced in the final era of what's now the final era of the CG Thomas the Tank Engine series, and Nia was basically introduced as a character to try to increase the, I guess, diversity of the Thomas cast. Nia is a tank engine from Kenya, and it's, I guess I maybe have a little more liberty in saying this. Nia is I don't like her. Just the way this character is handled really just reflects the most uninspired and pathetic way of trying to modernize Thomas the Tank Engine. I mean, how do you try to introduce an ethnic character into a world of anthropomorphic machines? I mean, in the CG era, they introduced locomotives from other parts of the world. For instance, Hero, and a locomotive from Japan. And then there's also Victor, a engine from Cuba. And even though it's not realistic, it's not at all compliant with the original Reverend and Audrey and Christopher Audrey lore for the Island of Sodor. But the introduction and inclusion of Hero, the Japanese engine, and of Victor, the tank engine from Cuba, there's thought put into it. There's been throughout different specials, there have been engines from other parts of the world. You could argue that they border on being stereotypes, but Nia, the tank engine from Kenya, who became a main part of the cast in the more recent episodes of the series before this iteration of the show ended and is being now replaced by All Engines Go, is really, really. They had good intentions. I'm not offended by the character in the sense that I feel slighted that they tried to have a engine character from Africa, and I guess therefore a sense of maybe ethnic or black representation in this cast of engines. With her, having an a Kenyan accent, and having that she's from, another country be part of the lore. I mean, there's some things I do have to question. For instance, I've heard that one of the stories with Kenya adjusting to life on the island of Sodor has to do with the fact that she doesn't know how to read Arabic numerals being the typical numbers that we use throughout most of the world. As far from what I'm aware, I believe Arabic numerals are in use in Kenya and throughout most of Africa, and so the idea that Nia would not be able to read Arabic numerals is perhaps, well-intentioned, but maybe a little questionable. The fact that from clips I've seen, so much of her character is just nothing but, oh, I'm from Kenya. Oh, for where I'm from, this and that, and it's just the fact that not just that Nia is a tank engine from Kenya, but that they go over the top and making her as obviously ethnic as possible. I mean, in terms of the facial structure, the accent, it's like, okay, fine, she's from Kenya, and, you know, and she has a black driver, you know, okay, fine. But when it comes to, like, her paint job or her livery, to have a text, like a paint job obviously inspired by African textiles, to the point where African textiles actually appear in what I believe are some concept images of work in progress considerations for Nia's paint job, is, I mean, you could really question if they're getting into kind of stereotypical territory. I mean, the Unlucky Tug made a video about these international episodes where it appears that a lot of the depictions of Thomas going to different parts of the world end up depicting these characters or these countries. India, I believe they went to Kenya, they went to China, they went to the United States, and depicting each area and maybe their people and some of the tropes of these places in the most stereotypical, cliche, and potentially offensive manner possible. Which is, you know, well-intentioned, but it just seems really, I guess, inauthentic or insincere. And Nia is so over the top. She's just maybe as over the top as Zecora from My Little Pony Friendship is Magic. And I already made an hour-long video about Zecora. And mind you, I am not a fan of My Little Pony in any iteration. I'm not a fan. I'm not involved in the fandom. I don't watch the show. I basically watched most of the first episode specifically so I could make an informed take on Zecora and her presentation and how she's handled in her introductory episode. I already made an hour-long video about her. You can see it there. But one of the points I make is just that it's Zecora. Okay, you have these sort of the main cast of that show. It's okay. It's these sort of Western American, presumably Caucasian analog, these sort of ethnically ambiguous pastel-colored ponies, and so to have use as different equine species, or different species of horses to as an analog for race relations or being from a different part of the world, and using a zebra for that is not a bad idea. But just I actually liked Zecora as a character in the episodes I saw her in, but just the fact that they go over the top, having her have Native American dream catchers in her home, the Burmese neck rings, the jewelry, it's just really over the top, nailing down. It's not just that she's a zebra, it's just they have to give her the accent, and she is voiced by an African American voice actress, I believe, or at least a black voice actress. I don't know if she's from America or not, but just the idea that they have to make Zecora as over-the-top exotic as possible, not that actually looking that way or dressing that way is wrong in any sense, whether you're from a certain part of the world or not, but just the idea that okay, we're going to have a exotic, or we're going to have a diverse character, and diverse in the sense of the singular is a whole other subject I could go on that would take hours for me to go into. We're going to have a diverse or unique character in terms of their geographical or ethnic origin, so we're going to make them as over-the-top exotic as we possibly can. And that same thing is happening with Nia, unfortunately. I mean, just having her in a realistic livery or paint job of a steam locomotive from Kenya is not enough. They just have to make this fictional, orange with African textile motifs on her. They have to go as far with it as possible. And of course, she's included in Thomas and Friends All Engines Go as one of the cast. They tried to diversify the cast. They have what appears to be what is supposed to be a high-speed electric train from Japan, but there's no overhead lines or third rail visible in any of these shots. And the way they characterized this, a high-speed, I guess what's supposed to be a Shinkansen, but it's depicted as just the front car, like it's a locomotive, and that's not how Shinkansens work. Once again, you could have these fun characters while still having something to do with real-life railroading and real-life railways, and they're just not going that route. this has nothing to do with railways, once again, which is my main problem while I'm making all this. But they insisted on having, I almost flat out called her Sakura, insisting on having Nia as one of the main female characters in this new version of Thomas. Instead, when in the the final seasons of the CG Thomas series, they took Rosie, a character that was introduced, I believe, in the era when Hit Entertainment owned Thomas, and when it was still in the model series, they introduced a character called Rosie, who was like a pink tank engine that, was kind of a counterpart to Thomas for a while, from what I understand. I haven't watched a single episode with Rosie in it, so excuse me if I'm not wrong, if I'm incorrect about that. But in the later seasons, the final seasons of the original Thomas series that ended with, season 24, I suppose, they seem to place emphasis on reintroducing Rosie, changing her from the toy-like pink, unrealistic livery that she originally had when she was introduced in the model series and in the CG episode she appeared in, replacing that with a red paint job, a more realistic red color. Many locomotives in Great Britain were painted red. And then having the NWR for Northwestern Railway painted on her tanks, actually acknowledging the original books in which the main railway of the island of Sodor, where Thomas and all his friends are pull trains, was actually called the Northwestern Railway, actually acknowledging the source material in a small way by having the NWR branding on Rosie and giving her a more realistic livery. They seem to be doing a great, going out of the way to reintroduce her, and only for her apparently not to be in this new version of Thomas and Friends, and insisting instead on Nia, who's this sort of token, over-the-top exotic ethnic character that is, and it's not that she's not. I'm not offended that she's ethnic. I mean, look at me. I mean, someone who perhaps was Caucasian or European in ethnic background would have might have to dance around this a bit more for fear of being seen as racist or politically incorrect. But I could say it. They made her as ethnic, and it's not just being ethnic. It's just that they made her kind of a stereotype and as exotic as they possibly could. I think for the sake of drawing attention to the fact that she is not from the European, the island of Sodor in the source material is off the coast of Great Britain. They wanted they wanted to introduce, I guess, a more ethnically diverse character, and they went about it in a way that I feel is very insincere and contrived. And I think that Rosie, especially in the more realistic red livery with the NWR branding, and even the smallest way acknowledging the original source material and of the main railway of Sodor being the Northwestern Railway, and instead having Nia, and having, even with her toy-like original paint job, Rosie was cool just because of the fact that the London, Brighton, South Coast Railway E2, which is the basis for Thomas, and the USA tanks that were purchased by the Southern Railway after World War II for use on the Southern Railway, Thomas's real-life class of locomotive and Rosie's real-life class of locomotive actually worked alongside each other in places like the Southampton shipyards in Great Britain in real life. So it would have been cool if, hey, let's have Thomas's main female counterpart be a type of locomotive, a model of locomotive that actually historically worked alongside engines like Thomas in real life. Even if even if it was just the same setup with the total lack of realism, just having that alone would have shown a certain amount of care that I would have taken note of and would have mentioned in a video like this. Now, I think I've gotten, at this point, I think I've said about enough, but what I want to talk about is positives of All Engines Go. I know a lot of Thomas fans aren't going to want to hear me talk about positives. You could turn off the video right now. But it's kind of, I want to talk about more my feelings of All Engines Go, aside from just my disappointment with the lack of realism, lack of respect for the source material, lack of respect for the real-life history, lack of respect for the subject matter, which is trains. And once again, I'm going to say this over and over. Thomas and Friends All Engines Go, you did away with the source material. You did away with the subject matter, which is steam railways and steam locomotives, and you did away with many of the characters that have been a part of the series since the actual age in which steam locomotives were still in regular service and were part of daily life. Now, getting into that, I think the people, Mattel, and the people that are making this new series at the behest of Mattel, they have an interesting job to do. The original books, these were coming out at an age when steam locomotives, there was nothing unique or special about steam locomotives or novel. Steam locomotives were just the way trains were pulled at the time, and electric traction and diesel locomotives were still, an incoming progressive technology. When Thomas and Friends started on television, steam locomotives that were still only very recently withdrawn from being a part of daily life in Great Britain. And so and even at that point, it was kind of noted by, television historians of Thomas, how incredible it was that Britt Alcroft and the team she assembled were able to take these books about obsolete industrial equipment and make them something that kids who didn't grow up with steam locomotives were excited about. And yes, you did have at that point the people who grew up with Thomas the Tank Engine, in the form of the Railway series. They, as kids, now they were adults. They could introduce it to their children via the television show, and the quality of those stories, everything that made those stories good in the 40s and 50s and 60s in the original books, were still made for good stories, still made for good television in the 80s and 90s. And even though they moved away from the Christopher Awdry and the Reverend Wilbert Awdry source material, starting with season 5, which I believe came out in 97, even without the source material, the stories they were telling which had some basis, even in season 5 and 6, believe they're still using a railway realism consultant to, sort of discuss, how to sort of adhere to real-life railroading practices to some extent. And as years went on, they moved further and further away from that. The point of all that is, and when you look at Thomas in 2021, you have a situation where you have a team, it's how do you make this show about obsolete industrial equipment appealing to kids? And the reason, the approach they took was to have it have nothing to do with trains and railroading. You have these characters, they're bouncing, stretching, adhere to gravity or physics in no way whatsoever. What I'm getting at is that I don't hate All Engines Go. If this was a side thing, and just this alternative version of Thomas, I probably wouldn't care enough to make this. But the fact that, or the idea that this is, from what we can see right now, the future of Thomas as a franchise, and whether or not this succeeds or fails is going to write the history of Thomas in the future, is kind of sad to me. And because it has nothing to do with real-life railroading, they've completely abandoned the source material, the subject matter, and the beloved characters, and the real-life history that were what made Thomas such a strong enough of a universe that it could be the basis for a live-action model television show, even after the age of steam locomotives is long gone. And I don't hate, when I look at some of the idea of characterizing Thomas himself as a very small child, it's not an inherently bad idea. Even if you look at the arc of, Thomas the Tank Engine, that being Railway Series number 2, Thomas the Tank Engine, the actual original book, if you look at it, it is kind of a story of Thomas maturing and taking on more responsibilities. But the idea of characterizing Thomas as a literal child, it's not what I would have hoped for, but it's not an inherently bad idea. The idea of the idea of, what I will say I don't like is just, I really wouldn't mind this. If I saw some of these artwork that I've seen for All Engines Go, if I just happened to run across this as someone's YouTube, a series someone was making on YouTube, just a fan project, I would have liked it a lot as something a fan made, a really interesting alternative take on Thomas. If I just saw these images as someone's original fan art on DeviantArt, I would have thought it was pretty cool. One thing I will say is unfortunate about the look of All Engines Go is just the extreme lack of detail. Like, the way the machines move, yes, it's not realistic, but for something that's unrealistic, I find the movements appealing to the eye. What makes me unhappy is that these movements, it's just the ultimate version, as of right now, of something that started so rooted so closely in railway realism, while still having these the fanciful fantasy elements and the beloved characters and exciting stories, and often even relaxing or calm stories. And I'm one of those people who will defend the 1990s Saturday ABC version of Sonic the Hedgehog, even though that was very different from the games. I'll defend not maybe the final product, but I'll defend the concept behind the Super Mario Brothers movie from the early 90s, even though that was very different from the games and the cartoons that existed for Mario at the time. So I don't hate it just because it's different. I just think it's really unfortunate that that this is going to be the future of Thomas, and that it has absolutely nothing to do with what made Thomas something that could last, that started in the Steam Age, when there was nothing unique or special about steam locomotives. Steam locomotives were just a part of life, and why these characters and these settings and these ideas were able to form the basis for something that lasted decades and decades and decades. And I don't think Thomas and Friends All Engines Go is something that will inspire people like me. And I'm not the only person on YouTube. I mean, I know the Unlucky Tug has also visited the Bluebell Railway. He's, I believe, an American, I don't know if he's from the U.S., but he's definitely from North America. He's a North American YouTuber and Thomas creator, Thomas fan, who actually did go to the Bluebell Railway as well. And I don't think All Engines Go is going to inspire any kids who watch it to, decades from now, make a pilgrimage to places like the TALYLLYN Railway or the Bluebell Railway. Or I don't think it's going to be something that's going to leave kids with a lifelong love or appreciation for real-life railways and real steam engines. And that's really what I think is unfortunate about All Engines Go. And I don't feel like Mattel has the courage to try to create something that will inspire, lifelong imagination in kids and appreciation. It's really just meant more to get their attention and get them to buy toys. And I mean, that's perfectly fine. I mean, they've been selling toys of Railway Series characters since, I believe, the 60s or something like that, and different tie-in merchandise for Thomas, or the Railway Series as it was then. So I'm not offended by merchandise or the drive for merchandise. It's the idea that the lack of care in terms of, they don't care about trains, they don't care about the characters, they don't care about the history. And that's what really is unfortunate about Thomas and Friends All Engines Go. And so I think I've said about enough for now, and thank you very much for watching.